Hi. I really do enjoy this book. I hope you're enjoying it. We are on page 35, and this chapter goes to page 51. That's quite a little bit. So, we're running through the forest and are on our way to the river port. Let's find out where they're going now. Remember, saccharin's not food. The forests were yielding to soft slopes of green. Studded and conical haystacks gathered around the central staves. Wide, shallow steps had been cut into the hillside to make it easier to farm, so that from a distance it seemed that the giant comb had been dragged sideways through the fields. Moscow was fascinated by the leather waistcoats of the farming men, their broad black buckled hats and loose shabby white shirts. The women all wore coarse print frocks and far fuller than Moscow's sand-colored dress. Over their white mob caps they wore wide straw bonnets, tied their chin with ribbons of different colors, and like all the other women and the girls of Chow, Moscow wore a tight-fitting cap of waxed linen, which smelled of old fat, but kept most of the water out. It seemed strange to her to wear 2 hats instead of 1, but, to judge by the farm girls tittered her, they had thought she was quite the reverse. Kempe Tyridin could be heard long before it could be seen. At the heart of the wind's bluster, there was a throat flutting, like 100 people blowing into the necks of bottles. There was a click-click clatter, like loose machinery. There was a keen, stealing yodeling. The hills fell back, and the tumbling tributary, which the people of Chow had always thought of as the river joined the real river. There was no shallow, treacherous bandit of a river, ragged with foam. This was a sleek and powerful lording some 30 feet wide. This was the Sly. Across the Sly, rippling and fluttering like a carnival carriage, stretched Kempe Tyridin. Most of the town was built across the 2-tiered bridge, the little shops and houses flanking the main thoroughfare. Rope ladders trailed from the window to rooftop. Wooden stairways zigzagged between bridge and jetty. A web of clotheslines crisscrossed every available space, so that Moscow's first impression was of a flutter of brightly colored cloth, saffron, mauve, sky, blue, mint, green. It was all the real town Moscow had ever seen, and it was too big and too bright and too busy to hold her head all at once. Above, the gulls spun and floated like tea leaves in a stirred cup. They followed each boat along the river, tearing off narrow strips of sound and their sharp beaks. They squabbled over spillages and tried to scare the errand girls from dropping something. Every roof was decorated with brightly painted wooden windmill, or a whistle of the shape of a bird, or clattering dolls on strings in a vain attempt to scare away the gulls, and the boats, grim old barges being loaded to the waterline with bales and boxes, while the hauliers bellowed laughter and spat tobacco juice into the water. Coracles, not like a row of turtle shells, keel upward for carrying in on the waterfront. Sculls and wherries, some with great kites, reclining on their decks, each embolized the colors of the guild of the watermen. Clint led way up the wooden steps to the bridge proper and paused before the door of a shop. "Well, shall we call here briefly?" he remarked over to his shoulder. Within lies a dear friend of mine whom I have promised to visit, and will be invaluable in our state of extremis. May I stress this silence is a fine quality of a secretary. He ducked through the doorway, and Moscow followed. Inside the shop looked rather as if an excitable gorgon had run amok. On the table and sills were cluttered stone feathers, stone briars, and stone flowers. 2 bird skeletons hung against the window so that their delicate bone structures could be seen against the light. There were crumpled and crumbling caps and sandals, stone pennies, scars, and ribbons stiff as robes of a mausoleum angel. Moscow recognized all these strange ornaments as ottomans petrified in the waters of Chow. "Here we are. Ah, Mistress Jennifer Bessel." Mistress Bessel was sturdy and sun-brown, and she had brought a glow of warmth into the room as she entered. She had a dusting flower on her bare arms, and under her cap a thick palette of hair which twisted around like bread swirl. Curiously, her hands were hidden in a pair of fingerless muslin gloves. "Mr. Clint," Mistress Bessel's smile widened still farther, and her dimples became wells. "So, my sweet friend has not gotten himself scragged after all." No. There is no man, god, or beast that could prevent me from keeping an appointment with you, my dearest Jen." Something in Jen's laugh suggested that she did not believe him. "Ah, this is my niece from Chow," Jen finished promptly. "My dear Bumblebee, look at her eyebrows." The little Chow bonnet was all very well for keeping one's hair dry. Eyebrows were a very different matter. The Chow water turned them so pale that they were almost invisible, making everyone from Chow look very surprised all the time. Moscow was no exception. Still as sharp as a gimlet you are, Jen. There was a slight note of annoyance in Clint's tone. Yes, she had been staying in the unpleasant little village. Chow has left our clothes so chill and damp, I fear the child will perish any moment. Jen, my sweet plum, I was hoping you might spare some clothes that are a little less, recognizable, asked Mistress Bessel. Moscow was rapidly coming to the conclusion that Mistress Bessel knew Hippopotamus Clint rather well. Clint lowered his lashes and smiled winily at the hostess' top button. "Well, I'll take your old clothes in payment then," declared Mistress Bessel. She turned to Moscow. "Listen, Blossom. Take the door, climb the ladder to the loft, and you'll see a leather chest right in front of you. There's a gown of gray stuff, which she'll do for you, and you can try on a couple of bonnets and caps. Don't go touching anything else, mind." Moscow obediently climbed to the attic and hunted out the chest of clothes. Then her new clothing draped over one arm, she much less obediently sneaked back down the ladder so that she could listen at the door while she changed. "Rather young for you, isn't she?" asked Mistress Bessel. "Ah, very sad case. I found her starving on the village outskirts, and no man with any feeling could have left her to—" Clint's sentence broke off with a sudden squawk. Peering through the crack of the door, Mosca saw that Mr. Bessel had playfully taken a pinch-your nose with the sugar-loaf cutters. "Now, Epitomus, when I want a story from you, I'll pay for it. Speaking of which, do you have any thieves to sell me this month?" Mosca felt her mouth go dry. Could Clint really mean to sell her out already? "Of course, Jen, 4 of them. An angler, a diver, and 2 knights of the road." From reading the more lurid chapbooks, Mosca knew that anglers were thieves who sat on roofs and used long hooks to tweak bags from the top of coaches. A diver was a pickpocket, and a knight of the road was a highwayman. Mistress Bessel reached out eager hands and received a bundle of rough pages, printed in large type. Each bore a large seal of red wax, the seal of a company of stationers. Mistress Bessel was too busy slowly and silently mouthing out words to observe the corner of another packet of papers junching from Clint's burlap package. Clint noticed it, however, and pushed it back in, hiding with furtive urgency. The moment was not lost on the secret watcher. I do like to keep abreast of news in the profession even now. I thought you would like to see this one, Jen." Clint extracted a particular sheet and began to read. "An account of ingenious crimes and stagments of the gang led by Rosemary Peppet, otherwise known as Lady Light-Touch. Here we are. Not since the time of the infamous Mistress Fleetfinger have we seen such craft and courage in a female breast, and such cunning use of a sex's softer charms, than the victims might even count themselves blessed." Mistress Bessel gave a wistful laugh. "Slop and feathers," she exclaimed. "Softer charms indeed. I never made use of my looks as Mistress Fleetfinger. I could have done, though." "Thought you could, Jen," Clint said gently. The corners of Mistress Bessel's mouth drooped slightly, and she thoughtfully smoothed the back of her gloves. Then she gave a sniff and looked up at Clint with a forceful brightness. "So, what kept you?" "I fear I've made myself rather popular in Chow, so much so that they could not persuade to part with me. Indeed, when I finally tried to depart, they put me in stocks." "Ah, you're taking ways. So how much did you take before they caught you?" "I was not caught," Clint declared in an orfordatory tone. "I fancy I was betrayed. I know that a stranger stayed in Chow with the magistrate last night, and, perhaps I was growing old and fearful, but I have a feeling the shadow at my back since I left the capital." "The gallows cast a long shadow," murmured Mistress Bessel, "and sometimes it cuts out of the sun. I got tired of feeling the chill of it on the back of my neck, which is why I turned respectable. That and these." She held up her hands, and they were dark shapes of the back, faintly visible through her light gloves, each in the shape of a T. Felon's brands, thought Mosca. T for thief. Well, that's page 42. So we'll move on next time. I love you all so much. I miss you.